One of the great thinkers in this area is Professor Kevin Slack, author of War on the American Republic. He's professor of politics at Hillsdale College, has studies with progressivism and liberalism. And Professor Kevin Slack, author, welcome, I think, for the first time to the Bill Cunningham Show. And first of all, can you tell the American people, Hillsdale College, where is it located? It's a great facility. What does it seek to do? And how's Hillsdale College different than most other colleges and universities?
Well, Hillsdale College is located in Hillsdale, Michigan. It's a small liberal arts college. One of the things that makes it distinctive is a great book's core curriculum. So I think in most research universities, and that's my background, you take a sampling of different classes across different fields. At Hillsdale, the students all take the same core curriculum, and it focuses on the great works in the Western canon. So students will read from Augustine, Aquinas, Dante, Milton, Shakespeare, you name it. But also in politics, all students are required to take the Constitution class. So they're required to read the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, and to have a discussion about American founding principles.
Oh, my gosh. Is that permissible? I look at what happened at Columbia Law when a photo of Brett Kavanaugh made Columbia Law in New York City to establish safe rooms so that college, not just college, but law students could have moments of reflection on Brett Kavanaugh. Then what happened in Stanford about 2 or 3 weeks ago, they had safe spaces. Does Hillsdale College have a safe space when some student reads the Constitution?
No, and the students read much more than that. So, for example, I'm teaching a late moderns class, late modern political philosophy, and we read Marx in that class, Karl Marx, and we discuss all the most controversial aspects of his political philosophy. They read, Rousseau, Kant, Hegel, Marx, Nietzsche, you name it. And I teach many leftist thinkers, and I teach them seriously. And the whole point is for students to challenge, to question their own opinions. And we live in this time today where it's at conservative colleges where you have the greatest freedom of speech, where any question, look, as long as it's not obscene, as long as it's not, vulgar, any question concerning truth can be asked in a classroom, and it'll be responded to.
Let me give you a little story out of Hamilton County, Cincinnati, where I'm located. You're in Michigan. The problems are mainly in left-wing cities like Chicago, but nonetheless, we've had here a long-serving prosecutor named Joe Dieters, who's kind of a rock-ribbed Republican that follows the law. Ohio, for example, has the death penalty. So he says, look, I don't make laws. What I do is enforce the laws. And so he retired, so to speak, from Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office and was appointed to the Ohio Supreme Court. And Xavier University, located in the city of Cincinnati, invited him to become a justice in residence. He's on the Ohio Supreme Court now as a justice. And for no money, there's no fee involved. And there's many students at Xavier University who wants him banned from campus because he enforced death penalty laws he took an oath to uphold. Does that say a lot about American leftists?
Yeah, I think it does. And that's become, it has rounded itself out into a religious system. Think about the position of the left. So if you were to describe the American regime today, you can argue that it's become an oligarchy, but every political regime needs some kind of legitimacy. And where has the establishment turned to for that? It's turned to identity politics. And so it's literally a state-sponsored church, right? All the people who forward these views, they have positions paid for by the taxpayer. They're ensconced. They're given lifetime appointments. And so the universities are almost monolithically liberal or even radical. Those are the acceptable positions. So you have a whole generation of students, that's all they know. And just like any state-sponsored church, they know a dogma. And anyone that challenges that dogma is going to offend them, and they're actually countenanced when they protest. You saw the Stanford protest. Can you think of a greater group of incompetent people who are going to be the lawyers and leaders of the country?
We're in trouble. I've been a lawyer 45 years, and I can recall about 15 years ago, University of Toledo brought in Antonin Scalia in order to speak and in residence for like a day and a half. And I know the politics, University of Toledo, which is far left, radical, progressive. Nonetheless, 15 years ago, Antonin Scalia, the great justice, could actually speak, teach a class, give a presentation. He got some pointed questions. In that case, it was about Roe versus Wade. Of course, Dobbs didn't exist. and the students were respectful. Has something happened to liberalism the past 15 or 20 years that involves cancellation and also involved ignoring the Constitution by lawyers who will be demanded to uphold it? What's happened to liberalism the past 15 or 20 years?
Well, I think when we use the word liberalism today, we're referring largely to those who call themselves centrist. Think about those who refer to the importance of reason and detachment and reflection. But when you go to these universities, what you find is an identity politics priesthood. And for them, you're talking about a religious appeal. It gives people a sense of meaning. With the decline of the old authorities, you could say Christianity, and in politics, even the notion of republicanism, right, equal citizenship under the law. We have this new religion that's taken hold. If you go to religious affiliation, particularly throughout the 90s, when you see college enrollment begin to really grow in the United States, you find that agnostics, atheists profess to have no belief, but identity politics has substituted that conception of a soul.
What's happened? Wall Street Journal had a report out that 25 years ago, 1998, that seems almost like the Dark Ages, during the Bill Clinton administration, that 60-some% of the American people said that, patriotism is important, that over 60% considered America to be an exceptional country. This is before Barack Hussein Obama took over. Something like 65% of men and women between the ages of 18 and 40, they wanted to get married. They wanted to have children. And now, 25 years later, the great majority of those students maybe that you teach at Hillsdale College, maybe not that college, but the great majority of college university students, especially females, don't want to get married, don't want to have children, do not think America is exceptional. They don't believe that patriotism is a desired attitude to have. And belief in God is well below 50% as far as an important factor in your life. What's happened to America the last 25 years?
Well, the only group, when polled, that prefers other groups to its own are upper middle class white progressives. So they're the only group that will say, we prefer others to ourselves, and this is a kind of salvific crusade that they're on. And part of that crusade is destroying the old middle class. And this has been going on for decades. What's interesting, and very interesting, is that most of these positions, the idea of systemic racism, unconscious racism, confessing your white privilege, becoming an ally with anti-racists, these are all around. These systems are around in the late 60s and early 70s. But they've ensconced themselves in the academy, and now they've become the authoritative position. So their teaching has been that the West itself is evil, that if you want to understand race, it's a Western confabulation. And so, therefore, we need to deconstruct the American founding, its conceptions of citizenship, and we're going to pull the veil off over your eyes to see how everything that you thought could have been decent is actually evil. And the problem is that has become the majority view among those who speak out in the academy, and that's all the young generation knows.
Wow. As far as destroying the middle class by having high gasoline prices, not be energy independent, having a currency where the yuan may take over the Chinese currency as the reserve currency, the collapse of the southern border, control of police departments out of Washington, D.C., educational facilities controlled out of Washington, D.C. Why would the progressives, who aren't the liberals, the progressives today, the Bernie Sanders applauded wherever he goes, and Joe Biden, who's told what to say every day, why would they want to destroy the middle class? How does that benefit progressives?
I think that's the only group that constitutes a challenge to their power. And I think this kind of explains the alliance between these large transnational corporations, which have no loyalty to the United States. I think it was, this was Ralph Nader. This is some 20 years ago. He asked, the top 100 corporations in the United States to say the Pledge of Allegiance before their board meetings. So this included Ford, as I recall. None of them would do it. And the reason is they weren't really American. They were transnational corporations. So if you look at those corporations or those who are in power, the real threat to that is going to be those who are nationalistic, those who say, look, patriotism is incredibly important. And the one thing that stands in the way of that power are going to be relations, institutions that are of more importance, such as the family, your local associations, your churches. And I think this is the focus on gender and sexuality. That's the best way to try to strip away other loyalties and to control children, right, at the individual level.
What role did the pandemic, how did the progressives use the pandemic of 2020, 2021, and the George Floyd riots to advance their cause of government control of important American institutions? What about COVID-19 and George Floyd? How are they somehow related?
Well, look at who the enemies were during the George Floyd riots and who benefited. I want to say all the stock market gains during that period of time were the 5 big tech companies. And who was singled out in the riots? Well, it was all those you'd say institutions that are affiliated with the middle class. They went after police unions. They went after small businesses, yet large businesses were deemed to be essential and could remain open. They shut down Christian churches, right? They burned Christian churches. They cut off the heads of statues of Jesus and Mary. And these were things that were, I don't know if I say accepted. These were not things that were singled out by the mainstream media and so therefore indirectly condoned.
Yeah, and in fact, I can recall CNN out in the front of these riots that were, quote, mainly peaceful, as 1,000 businesses, many minority businesses, for example, in Minneapolis and Kenosha and all over America, Cincinnati, Ohio, there were many, many businesses that were destroyed, burned out, and there was never a reference to the idea that those businesses hurt in many city areas are controlled by minorities and the minority-owned businesses, but that didn't make any difference, did it?
No, I think one of the Yelp surveys said that 60% of those restaurants that closed down would never reopen. And, of course, those that were smaller businesses didn't have the insurance that would cover the destruction of those businesses. My guess is that you have the largest buyers who came in and scooped up all of that real estate, probably for bargain prices. But I'd have to follow up on that.
I guarantee you that happened. And why is destroying police an important article of faith among progressives in big cities? How come getting rid of the police and having teachers' unions in charge of the public schools, which are disastrous, why is that part of the plan, too?
Well, if you look at it ends up being part of a system that I think has long been called on the right anarcho-tyranny, and that means you facilitate anarchy on the part of those lower classes, people that don't vote. This is why you would tolerate these entire tent cities of street defecators and drug users. And why? Well, they terrorize the average citizen, right? The middle class citizen. And on the other hand, you have a tyranny over the middle class citizen. So they're not going to prosecute all of those vagrants in the city. They're going to keep them, allow them to be there, even give them welfare to remain there. But when it comes to the middle class soccer mom, she's the one you're going to pull over for speeding and shake down to support, the city and to enrich the coffers. So there ends up being a kind of friendship with a lower class, a vagrant class, and you can harvest their ballots for election to keep their power, but you can also cow and tyrannize over and intimidate the middle class in those cities. And then, of course, they want to stretch their reach out beyond that to the state level and those who remain in the provinces.
Maybe the only thing that saves many American cities is temperatures and cold. Maybe that's the only thing. Here in Cincinnati, we don't have much of that, but it was tried about 4 or 5 years ago, and that same Joe Dieter sent down law enforcement to arrest the individuals, having given them a 24-hour day notice to get out, to leave because they were trespassing. And so part of what's happening in many major American cities is the fact that if it's a cold climate, defund the police, destroy the public schools. If it's a warm climate, put down the tents and the poopers and those with the getting $1,000 a month support to buy more drugs, put them in front of small businesses. Then what happens is the collapse of the middle class in those areas. And may I ask Professor Kevin Slack of Hillsdale College, is there a way out of this? Because right now the marching Marxists are coming out of almost all colleges and universities. And what we get a tip of the iceberg, what happened at Stanford and what happened at Columbia Law. I don't know if you're aware of Columbia Law. About a week ago, there were like 15 Columbia Law students from New York City who had a tour of the U.S. Supreme Court. And one of them asked Justice Kavanaugh for a photo. It was appropriate to do so, that they were out of argument or whatever. And so Brett Kavanaugh is standing there in the Supreme Court with about a dozen law students from Columbia Law smiling. And when that hit social media, they're now being shunned by Columbia Law professors and other students. There's a call to have them expelled from Columbia Law because they took a picture with Brett Kavanaugh. What does that say?
Well, I think what it says is that you have a certain group that's become a faction that has control over educational institutions, the university level, the teachers' unions for elementary school, as well as the law schools. I don't know if these progressives understand that there's going to be a backlash. Now, you can put this in the realm of faith, but many of the things that they've done have made Americans' lives even worse, and they've been able to carry these out because Americans' lives are actually, despite the inflation and all of the havoc that's been created, that you can still make a living. Is that going to be the case when we continue to prosecute our efforts in Ukraine, the conflict with China, the stability of the U.S. dollar? It also means that if the Republicans ever gain power, that there is a strong likelihood, if they have any spirit or will at all, that they're going to use some of the same tactics against the Democrats. What would that mean? It would mean that if the universities are 90% plus Democrat, if the administrators are 90+% Democrat, you could make a strong case that this is just graft. That's all it's ever been. And so the Republicans could ask for their own share of it, and they can start to purge those who are open partisans, as well as demand a kind of parity. And so I don't know if the Democrats see what's coming down the pipe, but there's a way that they discredit themselves when they become these monolithically uniform institutions of education. Yeah, it's indoctrination, not education. Once again, the author of War on the American Republic, professor of politics at Hillsdale College, is Kevin Slack. You have a Ph.D. Maybe I should call you Dr. Kevin Slack, because Dr. Joe Biden is called a doctor. It's Professor Kevin Slack of Hillsdale College. And Professor, I just hope things change. I can't think America as a republic can continue another generation or two if this is the course we're on, where there's no political discourse and everything important in America is being debased and not desired by individual citizens. And Washington wants to take over aspects, institutions of American life and rule it according to the dictates of Nancy Pelosi. I just hope we can do and survive, but got to run. Professor Kevin Slack, once again, thank you for coming on the Bill Cunningham Show. And if I had an appropriate age son and daughter, I'd send them to Hillsdale College. And thank you. Thanks a lot, Bill.
God bless America. Let's continue. Bill Cunningham, live with you every day. Your home of the Reds. News Radio 700 WLW.